There will come a point where the cheering stops, and you stand completely alone with your dream. What happens next will define everything. For years, I operated under a simple assumption: that effort would be seen, that struggle would be understood, that someone would eventually offer a hand. I believe support was the default response to genuine endeavor. I was mistaken, not because people are inherently unkind, but because the architecture of profound growth often requires solitude. Certain paths are, by their very nature, solitary. The pivotal understanding arrived not in a moment of triumph, but in a quiet hour of the night. But the world was asleep and my doubts were deafeningly awake. I saw, with painful clarity, that every time I anticipated a rescue, I was silently affirming my own incapacity. This realization was not a comfort. It was a dismantling. It stripped away the last vestiges of my dependency. The choice became starkly simple. I could either move under my own power, or I would remain where I was. That was the beginning of the true awakening. I started to act differently. I honor my commitments even when the audience had vanished. I learned to be my own foundation when the external world seemed to crumble. Because that is the essence of real strength. Not the absence of fear, but the quiet, unwavering decision to proceed when no one is there to witness it. In that solitude, I encountered my most effective mentor: silence. When the noise of the world faded, when the comforting distractions disappeared, I was forced to confront the fundamental questions. What do I truly value? What am I prepared to sacrifice for it? Will I no longer delay? Slowly, painstakingly, I began to reconstruct myself without an audience, without any external affirmation. You discover a different kind of footing when there is no one to catch you. You learn to listen more intently to the voice within when there are no others offering counsel. That is the birthplace of true self-trust. Not in the crowd, but in the quiet. Over time, a profound truth emerged. Being alone does not equate to loneliness. It cultivates focus. It teaches endurance, resolve, and an unshakable conviction. It reveals that you never actually required permission to begin your ascent. Yet, there was another deeply held belief I had to confront: the incessant need for emotional reinforcement. I once thought strength was a network that constantly validated me, that being comprehended was a prerequisite for progress. I would share my ambitions, hoping for mirrored excitement. I would reveal my battles, expecting comfort. When it didn't come, I felt deserted. But it wasn't abandonment. It was a lesson in reality. Everyone is navigating their own tempests. No one is indebted to fuel your journey. The more your forward momentum relies on external cheerleading, the more fragile your path becomes. I learned this through repeated hardship. Each time I leaned too heavily on another's endorsement, I faltered when their support wavered. The day I released the expectation of being understood, a weight lifted. I ceased waiting for a green light from others before I acted. I no longer required applause to take the next step. My progress became quieter, yet infinitely more powerful, because its source was entirely internal. I realized the most significant form of support is the self-respect you cultivate through your own actions. When you persevere through your most colorless days, when you build something of substance even in the absence of celebration, that invisible labor transforms your self-perception. It forges a deeper dignity, one that cannot be given or taken away by anyone else. To stop begging for rescue is to start building your foundation. Ceasing to ask for emotional salvation does not mean becoming hardened or detached. It means you cease operating from a place of lack. You move from a core of purpose. You stop searching for a missing piece outside yourself because you're actively engaged in your own completion. That is the pivotal shift. That is the moment you transition from waiting for a savior to becoming your own. A person who assumes full responsibility for their inner state no longer pleads for strength. They generate it from within. They do not operate from need, but from conscious choice. They do not petition, they act. They do not depend, they create. And when you arrive at that point, when you can stand firmly without requiring anyone to validate your pain, your effort, or your advancement, a remarkable transformation occurs. People perceive you differently, not because your exterior has changed, but because your fundamental energy has shifted. You no longer seek approval to move. You move because the decision is already made. You could be surrounded by 1,000 people or walking in absolute isolation. Your direction remains unaltered. You no longer act from the fear of being left behind. You act from deep-seated conviction, guided by something far greater than external support, your purpose. If others wish to join you, that is welcome. If not, you continue regardless. Head high, gaze steady, step sure. Because the instant you stop waiting to be saved and start saving yourself, you become an unstoppable force. That is where the authentic journey truly commences. There's a particular kind of weariness that doesn't stem from labor. It comes from waiting for life to be fair. It is a fatigue born from relentlessly replaying your struggles, from retelling the narrative of how things should have been different, from existing as if the universe owes you an explanation. I inhabited that space for a long time, anticipating understanding, waiting for circumstances to shift, for fortune to finally smile upon me. But nothing changed, because nothing can change while you remain entrenched in the identity of the victim. Eventually, you must recognize that the pain you continually revisit is not mending you. It is anchoring you to the past. Voicing grievances provides a momentary relief because it displaces responsibility. It declares, "This is not my fault." But beneath that temporary comfort lies a potent truth. Every complaint reinforces your own sense of powerlessness. The world does not respond to words, it responds to energy. And when your energy broadcasts, "I am powerless," life reflects that conviction back to you. So I made a conscious decision. No more complaints. No more reciting the same story of loss and injustice. No more rehearsing the pains of yesterday. Because each time I did, I was nourishing my weakness and starving my will. Initially, the silence felt oppressive. I felt a compelling urge to justify my position, to be seen as correct. But then I understood it is not about being right. It is about being free. And freedom dawns when you stop needing the world to certify your suffering. I began to view my challenges through a different lens. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" I started asking, "What is this intended to teach me?" Every obstacle carried a message, not about cruelty, but about development. Life was not punishing me. It was provoking me, compelling me to evolve. That is when I grasped a fundamental principle. Those who rise are not the ones who evade suffering. They're the ones who choose to utilize it. Once I stopped complaining, I noticed a peculiar void, a quiet space where my excuses once resided. That silence was intimidating at first, but it was the very silence that invites profound change. Because when there is no one left to blame, there is only one direction to look: inward. And that is where discipline finds its roots. Most people misinterpret discipline. They view it as a form of self-punishment, about forcing oneself to do difficult things. But genuine discipline is not punitive. It is love in its most potent form. It is the act of safeguarding your future self from the laziness, fear, and distractions of the present moment. When no one supports you, when no one checks to see if you showed up today, discipline becomes your silent, unwavering ally. It is the quiet promise you make to yourself. I will show up, even when I am the only witness. There were days I desperately wanted to quit. Mornings where the weight of apparent pointlessness pressed down on me. But I remembered a crucial truth. Consistency will always outlast motivation. Motivation flickers and fades like a spark. Discipline burns with the steady intensity of a sustained flame. I started with small, manageable actions. Waking at the time I committed to. Completing tasks even when inspiration was absent. Honoring my word even when it seemed inconsequential. Gradually, I began to regain respect for the person I saw in the mirror. You build self-respect by keeping promises to yourself. That is the secret so many never discover. You do not construct self-respect through positive self-talk alone. You build it by keeping the promises you make to yourself. By doing what you said you would do, long after the emotional state that inspired the promise has dissipated. Every act of discipline, every moment you select effort over comfort, is a vote of confidence for your future self. It is how you demonstrate to your deepest mind that you are reliable, that you are capable, that you are worthy of your own trust. People often inquire how to find confidence. The answer is uncomplicated. Though not easy, do hard things consistently. The more you show up for yourself, the less you will depend on others to believe in you. And when that shift occurs, something powerful happens. You begin to realize that control was never external. It was always an internal capacity. You were never powerless. You were simply undisciplined. Life interacts differently with someone who operates from a place of power instead of pain. When you cease complaining and start acting, the world ceases to pity you and begins to respect you. You stop attracting individuals who feed your weaknesses and start encountering those who reflect your strength. Discipline does not make life easier. It makes you more resilient. It does not eliminate challenges. It provides the stamina to confront them. It does not make people understand you. It makes their understanding unnecessary. When no one applauds you, become your own audience. When no one believes in you, demonstrate their error by not needing their belief. When no one checks on your progress, check in with your own vision. That is the quiet revolution of maturity. When you no longer plead for rescue because you have mastered the art of rescuing yourself through consistency, discipline, and unwavering purpose. And perhaps that is the true definition of power. Not dominion over others, but mastery over the self. No one may ever see your early mornings, your silent sacrifices, your private battles. But one day, they will witness the results. And by that time, you will not even require their acknowledgement, because you will know, with absolute certainty, exactly how you arrived there. The moment you stop waiting for understanding and start building without the need for applause, that is the moment you transition from victimhood to sovereignty. There arrives a time when external validation loses its flavor, when the compliments that once filled you begin to sound hollow, when the applause, the approval, the praise, all of it, no longer carries the weight it once did. This is not a sign of arrogance or detachment. It is because you have grown weary of needing permission to feel worthy. For most of us, this dependency is planted early. We learned that affection was something to be earned, that being seen, praised, or accepted was the evidence that we mattered. But as we mature, we carry this conditioning into our adult lives, chasing approval from partners, friends, and the wider world, like a child perpetually waiting to be told, "You are good enough now." But here is the reality you must confront. No quantity of external validation will ever heal an internal wound of self-doubt. It might offer a temporary balm, like a brief rain on parched earth, but it will never truly saturate the emptiness, because that emptiness does not originate from being unloved by others. It springs from being disconnected from your own core. I once believed validation was a reward, a signal that I was on the correct path. But I began to notice a strange pattern. Every time someone praised me, it provided a lift, but only for a fleeting moment. And every time someone criticized or misunderstood me, it felt utterly devastating. My emotional state was held hostage by the opinions of others. That is not freedom. It is a subtle form of imprisonment. It required years for me to understand that the craving for validation is not about ego. It is about insecurity. It is the psyche's frantic attempt to find stability outside of itself, because it has not yet discovered that stability within. The great privilege is to become who you truly are. And the crucial word is become. You do not find yourself, you build yourself. Layer by layer, promise by promise, moment by moment. And you cannot construct anything enduring if your foundation depends on the perceptions of others. So I embarked on the long, quiet labor of learning to validate myself. not through arrogance or self-deception, but through ruthless honesty, through facing myself in my entirety, both the light and the shadow. Each morning I pose a question: who am I when no one is watching? Who am I when no one offers approval? Who am I when no one applauds, comprehends, or supports me? The answer never came in words. It was revealed in action. It was showing up for myself on the days I felt entirely invisible. It was maintaining compassion when my mind leaned toward judgment. It was keeping my word when no one would have known if I had broken it. That is how self-trust is forged, not through recited mantras, but through lived integrity. It is a quiet form of validation. Not loud, not public. It does not garner likes or followers. It is the kind that allows you to look into your own eyes and finally affirm, I am proud of the person I am creating. You start to realize that self-validation is not about feeling invincible. It is about feeling grounded. It is knowing that even if your entire world collapses, you will still possess yourself to rebuild from the ruins. But life does not test this belief gently. It tests it through loss, through failure, through rejection, through moments that strip away every external anchor you once relied upon. I recall one such moment with perfect clarity. I had built something into which I had poured my effort, my passion, my very essence. And when it fell apart, I was left with nothing but silence. No applause, no comfort, no rescue, just the stark echo of my own disappointment. In that silence, I asked myself, what comes next? And a calm, steady voice from within replied, you rebuild. It was not a dramatic, heroic declaration. It was simply certain, like a fundamental law of my own being revealing itself. Rebuild not because the world expects it, but because your spirit refuses to be diminished. That is the power of self-validation. It enables you to rise more swiftly after every descent. Because when your worth is not constructed upon success, failure does not define you. When your sense of identity flows from who you are at your core, not from what happens to you, every fall becomes a lesson in refinement. You stop taking failure as a personal indictment. You start treating it as a professional development. You begin to ask, what is this experience teaching me? How can I use this to hone my skills? How can I transform this pain into propulsion, not proof of my inadequacy? Every failure becomes a reflective surface, one that shows you not how broken you are, but how much more resilient you can become. When I began to live by this principle, something fundamental shifted in my navigation of the world. I stopped fearing rejection because I recognized that rejection is often just redirection. Life saying, not this door, try another. I stopped dreading criticism because I understood that people can only perceive from the level of their own awareness. Their opinion of me was more a reflection of their inner world than a measure of my value. And most importantly, I stopped chasing the phantom of perfection because I finally embraced that progress and inner peace can coexist. I did not need to prove I was worthy of love or achievement. I only needed to remember that I already possessed that worth inherently. When you attain that level of internal stability, you cease reacting emotionally to every setback. You start observing with clarity instead of fracturing under pressure. You start responding with mindful awareness instead of blind panic. That is when resilience becomes your default state. Not because you have become hardened, but because you have matured. You learn that falling is an inevitable part of the journey. What truly matters is the speed and grace with which you return to your center. Some people invest years trying to evade failure, but that is a grand illusion. Avoiding failure is akin to avoiding life itself. The only authentic path to growth is to fall, and rise, and fall again. And the act of rising becomes an ingrained instinct. Every time you reconstruct yourself, your foundation becomes more solid. Every descent teaches you a lesson the previous one could not. At first, you rise from a place of pride, because you do not want to be perceived as weak. Then you rise from a place of defiance, because you refuse to be defeated. Eventually, You rise from a place of profound peace, because falling no longer threatens your core identity. That is the genuine transformation, when you no longer rise to prove anything to anyone, but simply to continue your own evolution. And the great irony is this: once you stop depending on validation, it often begins to flow toward you naturally. People are magnetically drawn to those who do not plead to be seen. They sense your quiet confidence, your independence, your wholeness. You become the anchor that others are searching for. But by that time, you no longer require their recognition. You can appreciate it, but you're not attached to it. That is the paradox of strength. The less you need approval, the more authentic respect you attract. You stop performing a role. You start living your truth. You stop chasing validation. You start creating genuine meaning. You stop trying to be understood by the world. You start understanding yourself on a deeper level. And that is the ultimate meaning of building your inner foundation. It is not about becoming emotionless or self-absorbed. It is about becoming unshakably centered. You feel everything deeply, but you no longer allow those feelings to dictate your direction. You hear the external noise, but you consciously choose which internal voice to heed. The pattern of seeking validation is an unconscious one, the deep-seated need for others to confirm your worth. Once you bring this pattern into the light of your awareness, you begin to reclaim authorship of your own narrative. You start making choices from a place of awareness, not insecurity. And when you do, your entire relationship with failure is transformed. You stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" You start declaring, "This happened for me to make me more conscious, more complete." That is when life ceases to feel like a punishment and starts to feel like a meticulous preparation. Each fall sharpens your insight. Each setback refines your patience. Each heartbreak deepens your capacity for love. Each loss strengthens your ability to release what no longer serves you. In time, you begin to perceive that nothing was ever wasted. Every pain was a sculptor, carefully shaping the person you were always meant to become. And once you truly internalize that, the concept of failure ceases to exist. There is only continuous refinement, because you have built something inside yourself that no external force can remove. A foundation constructed not from approval or success, but from truth awareness, but profound self-respect. The storms will inevitably return. The losses, the silences, the moments when the world feels utterly indifferent. But now, you will stand differently. You will bend, but you will not shatter. You will stumble, but you will not disintegrate. Because you have learned the most powerful lesson of all: you are your own foundation. And that is a truth that can never be taken from you. And if this journey toward building your unshakable self resonates with you, please support this channel by liking this video and following Winds of Thought for more guides into the human psyche.